I got too excited about the song.
Great music choices. Yeah,
Thank you.
it might just be the three of us today.
Yeah, that's totally fine. That Joyce Rice mixtape is so good. Let me turn off this thing in 1 second.
Welcome. Welcome, Nikki. Welcome, Alan.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank y'all for joining us today. So we are going to be talking about what it means to be a young leader in movement. And we just want to start off with introductions. And I can also tell y'all a little bit about how today will go. So start with introductions, do a check-in, and then we'll tell you a little bit about who we are and why we're here. And then we'll move into doing a grounding. And then we'll have a variety of questions that Clarissa and I will be fielding back and forth. And then we'll have a chance to all speak together.
Yeah, appreciate y'all for dropping in with us. Let's start off with introductions. I'll go first. And we're just doing name, pronouns, how we're doing today, and then something that brought us some joy this week. And I can start. I'm Clarissa Brooks. I am an organizer, a editor, and a journalist. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, but I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Have been in the M4BL eco space for quite a bit of time. And yeah, really excited and lucky to be here. And the thing that brought me joy this week was my birthday was yesterday, which is very exciting. But what was the good thing? You know, like birthdays are stressful. So I'm like, it was fun. Oh, I like people always ask me what I want for my birthday, what I want to do. And I have a very hard, like, no contact policy on my birthday. Like, I don't pick up phone calls or anything. And I literally just ate chicken and waffles and slept all day. Like, that's all I wanted to do. That's what I did.
Dream.
You said what?
That sounds like the dream.
No, literally. But all my friends are like, what are you doing? What's the move? I'm like, there are no moves. I'm gonna nap. I'm gonna lay down. So that's the thing that brought me joy, was just doing that. Yeah. Yuma, what about you?
So my name is Yuma. I use she, her pronouns. I am from the Bronx. I'm currently based in Harlem. I'm currently a program assistant at the Center for Third World Organizing. And something that brought me joy this week. Oh, that's hard. Let me talk about something that I did this month. We went to karaoke for my sister's birthday, and that was really fun. I love like a nice private room with karaoke when it could just be you, family, friends, acting a fool. So that brought me joy, and it just brought me back to like times when I was a kid and me and my sisters would be like watching MTV Hits and trying to follow all the dance moves and music videos. So yeah, that was something that brought me joy. And I'll pass it to Nikki.
Hi, Nikki, she, hers. I'm in Oakland. I'm at Leadership Learning Community. Happy birthday, Clarissa. And I'm eating pho right now that's homemade, and it's giving me a lot of joy, and it's 1 o'clock in the West Coast right now. So I'm gonna be off camera eating a little bit, but I'm listening. Thanks.
That sounds delicious. How about you, Alan?
Hey, so my name is Alan. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm a community organizer with Prophetic Resistance Boston. And what was the last part of the question?
What is something that brought you joy this week?
Something that brought me joy this week. Honestly, hard to think of. I've been very, very busy this week.
That's fair. That's completely fair. I hope that there's something that brightens up your week so that you can actually have something that's bringing you joy.
Yeah, if there's a way for you to get some sunlight, I highly suggest it. It's critical to the brain function. Beautiful. Appreciate y'all coming to our little session. We can start off with should we do introduction questions or grounding? What feels best?
Let's do the grounding.
Okay, cool. So this grounding space is just for folks to really think about what they're hoping to leave from this space with. If there's any like hard burning questions or thoughts that you're like, I would really love to have this parking lot kind of conversation. Yeah, just think about that as we move through the space. And if we get through questions and you're like, oh, this is still percolating for me, definitely drop it in the chat. And yeah, let us know so we can at least start to think through that. So yeah, think through that thought of what you want to leave this space with.
Yeah, and at any moment, feel free to like raise your hand, interject, ask questions, things like that. It's a convo, it's a conversation.
Yeah. Also, welcome, CJ. We just did introductions. If you're not ready to introduce yourself, totally fine. But just want to offer you the space if you want it.
I just want to say hello, I'm CJ, organizing manager with C2. Just wanted to really just come see what young people are talking about. So I'm like super old and just wanted to just listen
Super.
Yeah, you and Carisha keep saying y'all are old, and I just know that's not true. I just know it's not the truth. Okay, great. So our introduction questions for ourselves, we're going to do a back and forth and then open it up a little bit. Our intro questions are, who are you? Where are you based? What brings you joy? We already went over that. But more specifically, what brought you to movement in this current time and space? And yeah, Yuma, do you want to start or?
Yeah, I can go ahead.
Cool.
So as I said before, my name is Yuma, she, her pronouns, and I'm from the Bronx. My first intro to organizing was before I knew what organizing was. It was like high school and in like a very shitty Bronx public high school. And just like organizing other students, one, because the staff was so discriminatory against the women in the school, as well as we just didn't have the basic necessities. Like we had no water fountains, we didn't have air conditioning, and we had to like build together as students to like advocate for ourselves. I then went on to study Africana Studies and Public Policy at Brown University. And at that time, I was able to like delve into all my passions about like Blackness, Black literature, education, abolition. And I spent a lot of my time while I was there volunteering at a local prison where we taught GED classes and adult basic education classes. And that was like such a pivotal moment in my life because one, it was just like being able to work with people who like really, one, like got stuck in a system that they couldn't, avoid. And also being able to be a resource of some kind. Yeah, it was just a very lovely space and just learning from the women that was there, hearing their stories, building friendships. Eventually, I think one of like the biggest turns in my trajectory was when I participated in a human rights program. And it was a study abroad program where I got to go to Chile, Nepal, and Jordan and got to speak with local organizers and really got to delve into the whole idea of like grassroots versus NGO and like that big nonprofit wheel that we always see. And through that program, I was actually connected to someone who works at the Blackout Collective. And I started interning for the Blackout Collective in June 2020, and eventually transitioned to working full-time at C2. And the Blackout Collective is held within the Center for Third World Organizing. So yeah, I just work with a bunch of amazing folks here and been able to just explore and get the chance to try new things. I'm also an alum of MAP, which is one of our summer programs that help develop young folks in organizing. And this is a plug. If you ever have free time in your summers and like want to really get into like the nuts and bolts of organizing, I highly suggest the MAP program. But yeah, long story short, I'm pretty new to organizing and movement work in general, and really hope that like this could be a space where we can learn from each other and like talk about the ups and downs and nuances of being a young person in movement. So yeah, how about you, Clarissa?
I was gonna say all of my favorite organizers have come through the C2 MAP program, so very much a super big plug for the MAP program. Yeah, I also, while you were talking, I was like, oh wow, a lot of your organizing has happened like outside of like the movement TM space. But I still think that's really critical just because being in a formation is critical, but also like, yeah, you've been organizing from very early on. So love to hear that context. Hey y'all, I'm Clarissa. I am, I struggle sometimes to call myself an organizer because I haven't organized in a bit of time, but I think it's because my idea of organizing was very direct action, put your body on the line kind of organizing. And I haven't done that in a minute, but I am still an organizer, just in a different sense of the word. But I started off, I would say, I want to say college, but I'm thinking more critically about like what organizing means. And I just grew up in poverty in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I was dealing with and living through the conditions of like disenfranchisement, of systematic racism, of anti-Blackness since I was born into the world. And while I don't consider that organizing, I think that gave me a lens for the world that made it really easy for me to become an organizer. Yeah, so all that to say, but I officially learned the term organizing, learned about the legacy of the Black radical tradition in college. I went to Spelman College in Atlanta, and I was a part of a student organizing group called AUC Shut It Down. And our first action was interrupting Hillary Clinton in 2015. And while that is not the best way to start organizing, as I was arrested by Secret Service, it was a very abrupt start to help me really get a global and state lens on military. Yeah, it is this week. Tailgate is on Saturday, so I'll be there. But yeah, they gave me a lot of information. While in school, I started working for Color of Change for a little bit, then went over to 350.org, which is a climate justice organization. And I was there for about 2 years. And then I was at Rising Majority, which is a project of Inforbio for the last year. And now I work at a news publication called Reckon. So that's why I say organizer, like retired organizer, because I don't work directly in movement space, but I am a member of the mass engagement table. So at Inforbio. So that's me. But yeah, sorry for the long-winded answer. We're gonna start off with our first question. And Yuma, I'm gonna kick it off with this question of who are the people that you look up to when it comes to movement space? You're muted.
I am muted. I think over the past 2 days, we like really got the opportunity to see and hear from such amazing people. And I mean, some of the folks there from like Tenjue to Chinyeri to Kairishi have really been people that like inspire me and like help to shape my politic and like help guide me through like what the heck I'm doing. And historically, thinking through folks like Ella Baker, Miriam Kaba, just people within movement who are really focused on developing young people, really dedicated to like investing and supporting young people within movement, and allow them to flourish. I think like it's sometimes people, like it's possible to like be developed into something that like is just continuously like repeating history and like not like being innovative and being open to like new ideas and ways of moving through movement. So I think like these folks have been, yeah, just really inspiring and thinking of ways that we can continue to be innovative and like have faith in the youth to like hold stuff down. So yeah, those are some of the people that I look up to.
Yeah, I think it's when I was at the Rising Majority, I think the first call I was on where like Tenji and Chin were on the same call. I was like, I've heard of these people's names for years. I'm just on a call with them and they're asking my opinion. Wild stuff.
Amazing people.
Yeah, they're very nice, very sweet. Yeah, so definitely plus in agreement with those choices.
Thank you. So I'll pass on to you with the next question. What is an important lesson that you've learned from elders that you practice currently?
Yeah, I think the thing that I've been so grateful for in being in movement is the first like M4BL call that I was ever actually on was for Centoya Brown. One of the people I organized with was a part of BLM Nashville, and I got on a call and I was like, what are we burning down? What are we doing? And Ashley, damn, I'm not messing her name up. It's not Woodard. Henderson, basically was like, hey, sweetie, we're not doing that. Calm down. People who have been organizing around Centoya for 10 years are leading the strategy. So listen, and we'll go from there. So I've been really grateful for those moments of coming from student organizing. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels in the moment. And that's how it is. Like those conditions really necessitate, you can't wait. But more strategic organizing that I've learned from elders has been about patience, has been about community context, specifically like if you don't know the people moving something, you can't just jump in and make decisions. It's just disrespectful to like relationship building. So I've been really grateful for that and learning that kind of patience so that when I meet other organizers who are young or like really excited, I never want to like kill that fire in them, but I do want to remind them that like, do you have what you need to make those kind of decisions? And if you don't, you do have to slow down. So I've been really grateful to learn those lessons from folks.
Yeah, I love that.
Beautiful. Okay, so the next question, which I think feels really important to what we're currently talking about, is what pressures do you think millennials and Gen Zs have to save the world? Do you think that's showing up with young people? I'm thinking about climate organizing. Like, how do you think that phrasing is showing up for young people?
Yeah, I feel this is like an interesting question, just thinking of like just all the crap that we have to deal with in this current like time. I mean, there's so much weight on our shoulders as youth to when it feels like everything is going to shit and it feels like we don't really have a grasp on it. And we can see every day like how our planet is suffering, our ecosystems are suffering, Bezos and the others aren't letting up, Black people still getting killed, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like good to think about in what ways do we stay like empowered, focused, hopeful, like amidst all these things. Yeah, and I think like the biggest way to go about it is constantly like reminding yourself of like why you're here. Because I think oftentimes when you're like, what is the point of doing this kind of work if you don't think that there's anything possible beyond our current state? If you don't think that like liberation is something that we can grasp, if you don't think that like we can like be free in the ways that we want to. And I think, yeah, it's pretty easy to get sucked into like the nihilistic worldview that like nothing matters, like everything's gonna finish anyways. And like we all could fall victim to that, you know, because I think that's just like an easy way out. But yeah, just reminding yourself like why you're here. Why didn't you decide to, I don't know, be a consultant at a firm? Like why did you do this? And to like work with communities and like work for your own community, work for people who you care about. So yeah, it's a lot of pressure. And I don't know if I have the answers. Like millennials and Gen Z are just gonna have to be the ones that save the world. Clearly the boomers are.
Yeah. I also feel like social media, like if you want to throw yourself into an anxious spiral.
Yeah, I think that's what it is too. It's like we're constantly like, we know everything that's going on everywhere all the time.
And maybe we shouldn't.
Everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah, there was some, I don't remember where it was, but I remember seeing a tweet where somebody was like, it's not normal to see this many people's thoughts every day. Like to see this many people's tweets, feelings, opinions, like it's just genuine overstimulation. Yeah, it's too much. But yeah, definitely appreciate that. And I think that point of staying specific so you don't get lost in the chaos of things is really critical, especially in a world where you're supposed to have an opinion on everything. Yeah, my newest phrase is, I have no thoughts. I have no thoughts on anything, just the things I know. But yeah.
Hi, Sean. I see that you're new here. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please do. We did like a round of introductions a bit earlier. And feel free to do it in the chat out loud.
Yeah.
however
Yeah, if you're doing
is
stuff,
comfortable for you.
definitely drop in there.
Yes, yes. Okay, so let me pass it to you, Clarissa, for the next question. Over the past few days, we've had conversations about like burnout and like balancing work and life and all the things together. So what do you do to stay in the work, and what advice do you have for people to prevent burnout?
Yeah. Yeah, this was like a critical one because,
You're breaking up a bit, Clarissa.
in student organizing, and somebody said to
Clarissa,
me,
could you start that from the beginning? You were cut out, you were breaking off.
yeah, can folks hear me now?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, the phrase that they said to me was that the work will get done. And that was really jarring to me because as a student organizer, I was like, only 10 of us care about this very specific thing on campus. So I had to let go of the fear I had that if I didn't, or me and my friends did not organize around something, that it'll never get done and that nobody will ever care about it again, because it's not true. And yeah, it takes a lot to let go of that, to be like, if I don't do this thing, will anybody do anything about it? It's a scary feeling, but it was something that I had to face pretty abruptly in school because so many of us did get burnt out, like to the point where like mental health wise, none of us in the organizing group I was in were well enough to organize. And so I think most times when we talk about burnout, especially for young folks that are super, super deep in organizing, I try to really push the fact that folks will organize, right? If people want to change, they will do it. It may not be the way you want it to happen. It may not be as radical as you want it to happen, but it will happen. And people will have their own process with that work when it comes to that moment. And then lastly, I just try to remind folks to like have things that are near and dear to you outside of organizing. And we talked about this a little bit in the prep for this, but being somebody who really made my life about movement for so long, it was hard for me to connect with friends that didn't care about movement. Like I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, you don't want to talk about this all day long. And I became very annoying, which is, you know, a part of life. But my friends who were not organizing were really the ones that really held me down when everything kind of fell apart. So I try to remind folks to keep those relationships, have hobbies, have things, have points of release that are outside of movement that are just yours, because it's really important. It won't stop burnout. It won't stop the exhaustion of the hamster wheel, but at the very least, you know that you have some sacred things that nobody can change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think like, yeah, it's so easy to get sucked in and like, I mean, a lot of people have like told other people you need to like live, breathe, eat.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to obviously prioritize the things that you care about, but there's always a balance, and sometimes it could be overdone to the point of no return. Like there will be people who like never want to come back into movement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think
also
yeah, I mean, I also feel
point.
I also feel like the thing that's like not being said is like so many of us who were organizing, I want to say like 2014 up until 2020, like we were burnt out by the time we were 24, 23, like, because we had been in it for 5 years, gotten arrested, done the protests, done the actions, and really dedicated our like lives and bodies to the thing, to the point where like a lot of us have not come back, or we've come back in ways that feel safe, like doing like this panel or like doing the mass engagement table. Like those are ways that I can be a movement in ways that feel good to me. But if somebody was like, right now, put your body on the line for something, I'd be like, no, I can't. Because it took a lot for me, right? Like it really took just a lot for me as a young person. And I really try my best to remind young people who I see in that cycle that there's a way to be here that doesn't have to feel unsafe or doesn't have to feel all consuming. And I think that's a bigger movement culture question that I think folks are still struggling through. But yeah, when I see that little chaotic look in young people's eyes, I'd be like, oh, sweetie, have you drank a glass of water today? Have you called your mother? What's going on? Because I was that person. I was like, nothing matters to me other than this. And yeah, it took a lot of undoing to unlearn that. So yeah, I really do try to, yeah, just push that balance. And even like, if you feel like, yeah, this was it, this is all you can do for movement, that's fine. Like the fact that you cared enough is totally fine. I have plenty of friends who I organize with who are teachers, who are writers, who do IT tech, like they have no interest in coming back to movement, but I also know politically they're still as aligned as they were when they were organizing. And that feels really beautiful to see.
Mhm. Yeah, and there's also so many ways to be in movement. Like there's not one clear-cut way. Like you can decide to do communications, you can decide to do development, where it's like you don't have to face that day-to-day,
Yeah.
like I don't even know the word for it, but like
Push,
you don't have
yeah,
to always
pushing
do
the
direct
system.
actions or like knocking on doors, but like there's other ways that you can be a part of movement and what like fits your needs best, like
Mhm.
what's with your skills.
Yeah, especially as you get older, like there's just no way for you to stay on that kind of intensity level for the rest of your life. So yeah, but thanks for listening to my feel on that. Yeah, I wanted to go to the next question, which is about how do we prepare young people to lead? Are there any specific like skills or attributes that you yourself have felt that have been really beneficial to you in order to take space and lead other young people?
Yeah. This is an interesting question also with like, we talked about this earlier, but like, I don't necessarily see myself as a leader. I just hope that like, I kind of feel like I'm just like a bolt or something, a screw within the machine. And hopefully I'm like useful and it's not just a random part that's like helping the machine keep going. Um, but yeah, I think something that I've learned from like elders and from my experiences, um, is that there's a lot of people who are either part of movement or like call themselves activists, but haven't actually done any organizing, um, period. And like the importance that there is to like have participated in that, to have done that, because it's essential to like being able to like know what communities you're working with, like know your own community, to know like what issues are pertinent. Like how do you know those things if you haven't like actually organized within your communities and things like that. So I think yeah, it's an essential part that we like overlook very often, especially for like the folks who might be doing like some of that behind the scenes work. Um, and yeah, it's like, it's really just good to know the ins and outs before or like during being a part of movement work, whether that's like in the beginning, in between, after, periodically. Yeah, just to check in and make sure that you're still like connected.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing that I always think about when it comes to development, because I think maybe the word we're probably thinking of is like development, maybe not leadership. Because I know for me, I've always been like, I don't really want to lead anything. I want to like maybe help people get to another place. I don't
Right.
want to like be the head honcho or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that what you said about like political alignment feels really important. The political alignment part is probably the hardest part, and the relationship building, because I think so many young people, especially with social media, it's really easy to just become like an activist TM, right? Who is like maybe no political home or no like centered political landing
Mhm.
in a certain way. Like I'm thinking like when I was at 350, there were a lot of young climate activists who like had never read about Black feminism,
Mhm.
but were like on the Hill. I was like, okay, well, this is, interesting just in like political placement for these young people. But yeah, I'm thinking more so about that. I think it's really easy for young people to kind of see that identity as like a commodity, and to see that kind of be the easy get instead of organizing locally.
Yeah. And I also like think the same thing when it comes to like professors and stuff within academia who like might be doing like work around Blackness, it might be work around organizing, et cetera, or like they study these things, but like how
Yeah.
often are they going into different communities and like doing the work and speaking with people and making sure their theories work
Yeah.
and stuff like
I
that.
actually feel relevant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and CJ, the TM, it's basically just like a social media slogan, but the TM is like when you see like trademark on food products.
Yeah.
But people call a lot of activism like activism TM because it's the like super stylized branding marketing kind of activism that's very like not centered in a political home and kind of more individual.
That's a great explanation for TM. You are not old, CJ.
But yeah, do you want to roll us to our next question?
And just to check in, do folks have any
Yeah.
like comments, questions, thoughts?
This is really good to hear because oftentimes, young people really don't have a space or a voice because they're always being told what to do, and never really being invited to the table. And so it's just good to hear, y'all brainstorming and going back and forth. And I'm learning a lot. This is pretty good.
Thanks.
Thanks, CJ.
Something I was thinking about was, oh, go ahead, Alan. My bad.
I just wanted to say, so I heard you all have mentioned like, that it can be kind of difficult to find where your political affiliation lies, like being like, okay, you're bombarded with this view and that view and this view. And for me, I was actually unaffiliated for a while now, but I recently changed my affiliation to Democrat. Just because, for me, I was able to go through and say, okay, well, they believe this on this issue and all that. And you get a general feel for what is their beliefs. And then you have to say, okay, what are my beliefs? And even if I disagree on this point, where do I most fit in? And then another strategy I think would be maybe like I took a quiz and I was like, okay, so politically, what would be like, what would I stand as? Would I be conservative? Would I be liberal? Like, where do my views align most? And what party does that align most with? What political ideology does that most align with?
Yeah. Do you feel like you found like more clarity on where you're landing?
Yeah, I feel like through, listening to their different ideologies and having taken that quiz, I felt that to be helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you'll always find that like, I mean, we see this within like M4BL, within like all organizations, like you're not gonna find all people who have the exact same mindsets, exact same political leaning, or not political leaning, that's not the right word, but just everyone has different, like there's some people who's gonna be communist, there's gonna be some people who are anarchists, there's gonna be some people who like lean a little bit more liberal, but hopefully at like the very base level, the values remain the same. And like as long as that's aligned, then it's able to work. You'll never find two people that are exactly the same.
Yeah. I think the thing that I was thinking about that CJ mentioned was about young folks kind of like just not being allowed to speak. I think something that I really struggled with in school, and maybe now that I'm out of it a little bit too, is like there would be celebrities or really famous organizers that would come to like Spelman and Morehouse, and young people would come to these events and be like, tell me how to be an activist, tell me how to do this thing, instead of them feeling comfortable enough to do that on their own terms. And that might be a little bit of a double-edged sword, but I think the biggest thing is like young people aren't asked their opinions on things because they're told often that like they should look to other people. And, having a safe place, which is why people say, find a political home, is young people need a safe place to be like, I don't know what communism is. I don't know what socialism is. I don't know what these big terms are. I know that I take care of my siblings. I struggle to, my teachers are rude to me. Systematic, and just having political homes to do that in is, I think, really, really important.
One of the things I liked about Rising Majority conference was that the young people, like when they didn't understand words, like or didn't understand the vocabulary that was being used, it was such a safe space where they were allowed to say that, and the facilitation was so amazing. They actually stopped to like break down, that inclusion. And I was talking to a young girl from Vegas named Amanda, and she felt kind of like out of place, but being in safe spaces, I don't think that people realize having safe spaces for not just young people, but people from just from the hood who come to these places where folks might be in suits or speak with a different vernacular, and they might feel out of place. So I think safe spaces for young people, when people who aren't involved in even just movement or just not understanding pronouns. You have folks who come from places where they've never heard of people using pronouns, and just having safe spaces is very important. I think that I really believe young people have led that charge into making sure that we have safe spaces. And I think young people have led the charge on making sure that health and wellness has been included into movement spaces as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks for that,
definitely.
CJ. Okay, so I think it's my turn to ask you a question, right? Okay, so this question is about navigating grassroots orgs, the nonprofit world. How do you have any advice? Do you have any like experiences with like trying to avoid or navigate the nonprofit industrial complex? Yeah, like how do you figure out which organizations to trust? And also like which organizations to trust and know that like won't just replicate like the like neoliberal
Structure.
structure and mechanisms.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also trying to think like, what's the most helpful point? I think that the type of like, there was one time that somebody asked me like what type of like movement elder I want to be. And I think the kind of movement elder I want to be, I'm gonna get to this somehow, is that I want to be an elder that's like honest. And the honest thing is that like you can't not live in like nonprofit industrial complex. Like it's just not possible if you're in movement, right? Because movement is mainly built by nonprofits, not all, but some. And so yeah, it's hard to not be in that. But I think specifically if it's a job, that feels very different versus a political home. Like your political home is where you want to like struggle and be in debate and like really push the organization. A job can just be the place that you're like, I'm just here to do my job and do it well. I have my points of concern. I can push where I can, but I also know that at the end of the day, like this is a place that I work at. And I say that because so often I worked at global nonprofits where I was pushing folks to like do better and be better. And it was causing me strain. It was causing me like health issues to be that stressed out, to be one of 6 Black people at a global nonprofit. So I think in those ways, I've been able to create some more boundaries around church and state when it comes to my political home versus my job. I still want to work at places that feel politically aligned with me, but I do just have more boundaries about like, these people are not my family. I don't gotta like all these people. I can do my job well and with skill and rigor and integrity. But my political home is the place that I actually want to be like volunteering and reaching the ground in a more visceral way. So yeah, I just try to provide that distinction to young people because it's an inevitable question. Like once you learn about the nonprofit industrial complex, you like, oh, it clicks and it makes sense. But I also don't want folks to feel like there is like a utopian world that they can get to tomorrow where they can live labor-free, work at a place that's perfect politically, and that they're never gonna have any issues. We're working towards that. Folks are still building that reality where we have a world that actually meets people's needs and where we don't have to organize for the bare minimum. But in that meantime, I just, want people to have those boundaries for themselves when they work and organize in certain places, just because, you'd be crying over a job and you're like, this job literally does not deserve these kinds of tears and emotions from me. So yeah, that's what I try to leave folks with is that kind of honesty about the state of things. And also that like, you don't have to be in movement in that kind of way. If you're just like, I'm here to do my job and do it well, that's it. You can do that too. Like there's lots of options about how you can engage in ways that feel good for you.
Yeah, I love that advice. I think like, I mean, from people that I went to school with, some friends, they're like, oh, like I want to do something that's like movement, but like close. And they end up working at like a foundation and they're like, I hate it here. But also, they pay a pretty check. So it's like, knowing that like you could always spend your free time going to community organizing events, finding your political home somewhere else. So yeah, I really love that advice. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, and it can be like, I also think as somebody who's like not really quite sure about where my political home is also possible to just like organize book clubs with your friends. Like there's so many other ways to be in political relationship that don't look the same as they used to, especially after the pandemic. I feel like a lot of folks were like, oh, I have to be in movement in a very different way because people can't be in person. So there's always different ways to do it.
Agreed. So there's one last question for you. I think actually we both could answer this, but how do you build confidence as a young leader?
This is to me.
Yes.
Okay. That's a really good question. I think the confidence comes with like practice, like really doing something over and over again. And doing it with other people and like failing was really how I felt confidence in things, and being able to say like, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, failed miserably, would not suggest folks do it this way. And so living with those lessons was really important for me, not feeling shame in those lessons either, but also trusting that like, especially when it comes to like giving advice in these kinds of ways, like people are going to make their mistakes in their own time. So I can say, hey, don't do this, don't do that. But also it is kind of part of the life process to just do the thing and fail and learn the lessons. So I think that's how I've done that. I also think that people giving me really genuine and like skill focused feedback. I had a boss one time who told me that I was like worth investing in, and that just stuck with me in a really specific way that I had never heard, because I think at the time I was just one of the people that was never able to do my job really, really well. And so for them to be like, you're worth investing in, really did something for me. And yeah, I'm just really, really grateful for that advice in that moment, because I was definitely like, I don't know how to do this job. I don't know, think I'm ever going to do it well. So yeah, I think that's how I do it. What about you?
Yeah, yes to affirmations. I feel like that's kind of what's been holding me down for the past like 2 or 3 years in movement. It's like, yeah, it's nice when someone like acknowledges that like, oh, the work that you're doing is important and it's useful, and you're like, you're not doing too bad. And that definitely builds up confidence. I think like, I also agree with the sentiment of like, you just have to like go through the motions. And if you fail, you fail. If you don't, you don't. But like, you get to learn the lessons of what you did, what might have went wrong. You can like take that back and be like, okay, I know now what I did wrong, so I can just build upon whatever I'm doing in the future to make sure that it might work next time. Yeah, I think those are like really important. I think kind of to CJ's point earlier, it's like finding spaces where you feel valued and you feel like you can contribute and that it matters. Because like constantly either being shut down or not feeling like you have a space to be able to like voice your opinions, your viewpoints can often lead for you to have like bad confidence within movement spaces. So yeah, safe spaces.
Yeah, they're critical. I can shoot us to our next one.
That might be the last one.
That might be the last one. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Do we want to open it up to questions from other folks?
Yeah, do folks have comments, questions, thoughts? It doesn't even have to be a put together thought.
I have a question. How often do you get to have these conversations with each other? Not like exactly you two, but you know, and with other folks who feel like younger folks in the movement.
Yeah, not often. From my end, not often.
Yeah.
Sometimes like when like within M4BL, we had like our table coordinators monthly meeting, and like most of us were like young folks in movement. So like that was dope, just like hearing what other people were working on. But I haven't had like a really formal space to like actively engage with other young folks in movement.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit harder because folks are a bit more spread out these days. I used to be a part of BYP 100. So that was a really critical space to like be in community with other young people, as I was one of the founders of the Atlanta chapter. And that's kind of hard to come into and hard to find. Yeah, so similar, like the Mass Engagement Table conference that we had a few weeks ago was probably the first time that I like saw people that I used to organize with in college for the first time in like 3-4 years. So that was lovely, but it is not a regular thing.
Like maybe we need to create some spaces. Maybe that's the next
Especially
step.
just because like so many of us are experiencing similar things. And yeah, I do worry about like if movement culture is shifting in the ways that people are saying it is, because the people that have to deal with that are us. Like we're the ones that are going to be asked those questions as people move into leadership positions. So I do worry about that, but I'm also like, maybe I'll be on a cottage somewhere feeding chickens. Nobody will ask me these things.
I feel like I'm in a lot of movement building spaces because of the work we do. And I'm a millennial, but I'm often the youngest person at the table. And I'm like an older millennial too, you know, like have kids and everything already. So I just feel like, and the way like those conversations happen with the most progressive people, the kindest, gentlest, you know, like it's all like the good people in life, but still they can't reckon sometimes the generational like differences. And sometimes it's a little like condescending. You're like, what did you just say? Like, what did you just assume about everybody who's younger than 40? It's just a lot, you know? So I think a lot of spaces now are really right, like more than ever, especially ripping off of what you said earlier. Like sometimes you feel like the pressure to save the whole planet is on your generation or on like our generation. And that's asking a lot for not having a seat at the table right now.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think I wave in between that space of like, I get why older folks in movement are a bit more guarded about their practices because they've literally put their lives on the line for it. Like they built the thing that we're inside of. So I get it. And also the culture of movement currently has to shift if we want it to sustain, because the way it's going, a lot of young people are literally burning out within 2 to 3 years of being in it and going and leaving and not coming back. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is like, how are we going to keep this thing going if we're not actually keeping people in this thing for periods of time that are actually sustainable?
Thank you.
Okay, so I see in the chat, CJ wrote, what do you think about hip hop and the role it plays in movement for young people? Oh, I'm like, how do I answer this? I don't know.
I think that's a really good question. I think folks have been, especially, I think folks that are in movement that are like trying to leave and enter the entertainment space have done a really good job of organizing certain artists. I think the hard thing is that at the core, hip hop is about capital. And it's hard to be an artist that doesn't care about capital. Like even No Name or Smino or artists that have a more leftist politic, like, you know, like your goal is to sell records, your goal is to make money off of the product. But I know that there are a lot of great movement folks who are moving those people closer to movement, but is Diddy ever going to be a socialist? Absolutely not. But he does have the reach and the power. So I think that's the hard thing is like those artists with that much power are gonna invest and care about the things that bring the money, which is the Democratic Party, electoral politics. They're not gonna be as invested in more leftist spaces, abolitionist spaces, because those things don't make the money.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like the majority of people are like the Diddy's, where it's like, oh, if I did it, you can do it, Black capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. And I think sometimes like that kind of thought is what strays people away from movement and like more towards just like being a part of the system that already exists. Yeah.
I think it's hard to see though, like seeing people take movement and turn it into a product is definitely difficult. Like seeing Jay-Z. Yeah, right. Like seeing Jay-Z make the Frank Hampton movie and then be like, stop saying eat the rich. Like, do you know a movie he made?
That was a very interesting take from him. He was like, stop saying that, it hurts our feelings. I'm like, okay. Okay, sir.
Yeah, but he's also Jay-Z, so what hip hop head is gonna tell him no?
Yeah, thanks, DJ.
Oh, do you
Well,
have anything?
you said, what do I think about it? I think that, I mean, like, I know that like when Kendrick came out with All Right, that was like one of the major songs that was used during the protests.
Mhm.
And I was just curious, like you said about Diddy's and it's about capitalism and making money, but I think that we need to cultivate artists. One of the things that I used to do was I would go find the top artists for those local cities and look at and see how many views they got, how many followers they had, and then I would invite them to panel discussions locally.
Mm,
So even if they weren't civically minded, now by the time they become the next Kendricks or J. Cole, we would have relationships and the conversation and the music could be different, so they can be politically savvy by the time that they did get to where they were going. So just wanted to hear your thoughts on where it is right now.
yeah, I think that's like the perfect kind of relationship building structure. I think like in places like Dallas, even Charlotte, like it's much easier to get to those kind of artists and like invite them to events, invite them to fundraiser events. I think once you get a little bit bigger, it gets harder, but I wish we did those kind of things in movement. That's stuff that I'm like, even I remember there was a time in college where I really wanted us to invest in like local party series and connect it to movement
Mhm.
in just more honest ways. Like
Mhm.
if there's a huge party series happening in Atlanta, there's no reason why movement shouldn't be involved. Why we're not co-sponsoring, why we're not using that as a place to canvas. But yeah, you know, the old heads be like, it's
Yeah.
useful. That's
Yeah,
silly. That's not the
and the
way.
old heads don't recognize our culture because like
Exactly.
Atlanta is super lit. And so
Apart.
why aren't you investing in the nightlife and in the parties and what's going on? Like it doesn't move like a Milwaukee would move or Gary, Indiana. You have to understand what's actually happening locally on the ground.
Exactly.
with
And then they'd
young
be like,
people.
I don't know why nobody doesn't come to our membership meetings. And I'm like, because everybody's at the party.
Yeah.
You gotta have that on the
They there. But I have seen organized like places do it. There's an organization in Atlanta called Snapco. Snapco just sponsored a really great party series, and they're literally using that as their canvassing tool for their coalitional work. So it's happening. Is big movement doing it? No, but you know, I think Snapco is one of like the sharpest orgs that we have right now.
Mhm. I love Snapco. Anybody else have questions, thoughts, concerns? Has anything rubbed you the wrong way?
If we ruined your ideas of movement.
I did just want to say that one thing that stood out to me was the way this meeting was structured was I felt more inclusive because it was structured in a way that it was interactive as opposed to not having the ability to give input anything like that, you know. Instead of feeling like you were being talked to, you actually felt as part of the conversation. So I appreciated that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's wonderful feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Should I do a quick closeout question for us?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we could do a round of just like, what is your like movement? What's your dream for movement in the future? Like, what do you hope that it looks like? Yeah, and I can go first just as an example. I think in the future, I would love if we had a movement culture that was more rooted in trust in Black people. I know that's hard to do and say in like the world that we exist in, but yeah, for us to like genuinely trust each other, I think would really get at the core of a lot, especially when it comes to generational divides, when it comes to conversations about harm inside of movement. Yeah, I think that would just be a really beautiful place to start from, because then it makes, you know, strategy and visioning a lot easier if we trust each other in ways that feel good and safe, not just like you're at this place where I trust you, but really like yeah, that actually moving in a way that feels good.
Mhm.
I'll pass it to you, Mo.
Yeah, when you first asked that question, I was like, I would like us to be in a place where we don't have to exist because we've gotten everything that we've wanted. We've won all the wins, but yeah, I think it'll be nice if more folks within movement like moves with humility. I think sometimes people like get stuck in their pride, and like those are the things that make it hard for either like young folks to want to like engage or like feel like they have a seat at the table. Or even coming from young folks, there's a lot of young folks who come in thinking that they know everything and they don't. And like really need to like spend time talking to other folks and learning and working on their political education, etc. So yeah, humility. I'll pass it to Nikki.
I think maybe a future where like this isn't a plateau that we're experiencing right now of like more leaders of color coming into space, but that there is a future for the social good sector. So that means like we're not burning out all the young folks coming through right now.
Mhm.
Also, like with, this is a lot to ask. And I think implicitly we know this, like if more of us are into these places, we're not going to uphold these systems that have harmed our communities. So we're not going to repeat the lessons from like the nonprofit industrial complex in it, right? So then there has to be this cultural shift that goes along with it. We have to be in better relationship with ourselves, our land, and our communities. So it's a lot to ask. I feel like tired thinking of that, but I also feel like if we have more folks in space, then it won't be on like the minority leaders, but it'll be like a more collaborative feeling. So
Yeah. What does it look like when foundations are ran by like young people of color and not like a whole bunch of rich white folks that haven't like been in community in a long time?
right, and that's actually happening because right now there's a huge wealth transfer going in from like wealthy, older, usually white folks who are, dying, and then they have to transfer to their millennial and Gen Z children. So that's actually happening right now in like the world of wealthy people. So activating those young donors or young wealthy people to be more in alignment is really an opportunity we actually have.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. How about you, CJ?
I think you made a valid point where you said like young people. I think it's like young people coming into the space don't come in thinking that you know everything. Bring what you do know, and also understanding that the people who've been in movement for a long time aren't young anymore, and so they have to not think they know everything as well. And somehow finding that balance of intergenerational balance so we can keep doing the work and do it in a loving space.
Mhm.
Practicing what you said as well, humility. I think that's the key.
Yeah, we can't exist without one another, for sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for engaging us past the hour or so.
We appreciate your time.
Great job. Great job, y'all.
I hope you do more of this. I mean, I would love to be in more spaces where I'm not the youngest person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 3 different panels going on. So like it should have been way more people. Or this is disrespectful to me to young people again. Like this should have been. This is what we're
It's totally
talking
fine.
about on this call right now.
But it's always the really good panels that nobody really goes to. So I was like, I'm not insulted at all. Because that means it's probably going to be easier to facilitate with less people. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and it's
so
recorded, so
disrespectful. So disrespectful.
yeah.
So, I ain't going. The young people ain't talking about nothing.
Yeah, but thank y'all for coming through. And yeah, we appreciate y'all sticking around with us.
Oh,
yeah, feel
wonderful.
free to hop into any sessions happening right now or whatever's coming up next.
Yeah, and Nikki, feel free to go onto the board and like they have a board where you can go talk. They got issues, talk about panels you like. So go on the message board and comment.
Yeah, we gotta do that.
Yeah, so we need more spaces with young people.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what you need.
Thank
Let 'em
you.
know. All right, y'all. Peace.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one. Bye.